The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications, connecting Virginians to their government. We're really pleased to have one of the new members from the House of Delegates with us today, Delegate Paul Krizek. Good to see you, sir.
Hi, Woody. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, tell us, how is it as a new member of the House of Delegates?
It's exciting. It's been it's a real learning experience, and you really jump in kind of head first, and things happen quickly. There's no messing around. Every day is a busy day.
Was there any training or seminars for new members of the House of Delegates to attend?
Yeah, we have a class of 13 new freshman members out of the 100, 4 Republicans and 9 Democrats. And so we had a good group, a good cohort to train, and the clerk's office was really helpful, and they had us down a couple times ahead of time, back in December, and then early January we had some training too, so that really helped. My biggest concern was on the floor. There's the voting buttons, and and the speaker doesn't give you much time, and you've got to vote really quickly. I mean, sometimes we're talking seconds. And so I had my hand like poised right over it, but I'm starting to get a little bit more at ease with that. But I used to work on the Hill, and they give the congressman all the time in the world to vote, and you know how long you have, and you can see the time ticks off the clock, and you got TV monitors everywhere. But here it's rapid fire.
Now, were you able to attend the commemorative meeting in Williamsburg this past weekend?
I did. We came back yesterday. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed that a lot. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
It was we went to the old Capitol. It's not the original Capitol. That's no longer there, but it's rebuilt to the same specifications on the same exact site. So it's you really feel the history. When Thomas Jefferson was a young man there, and Patrick Henry, and even George Washington. So it was really something to experience that, and it was very nice. We didn't do any business really. We had a couple resolutions, commemorative resolutions, and and we had some speeches, and I learned a lot. It was fun. I felt like I was really a part of history.
Now, I understand there was an interesting debate that 2 actors actually performed about the adoption of the Constitution.
Yeah. So we had dinner at the end there, which is a very nice place. I recommend anybody going to Williamsburg to visit. It's really a wonderful place to go. Right now's a good time. There's not too many folks down there. Good time of year to visit. Of course, you should come to Mount Vernon, which is where my district is, and that would be a good trip to go Mount Vernon and then Williamsburg. But we had James Monroe, and Patrick Henry, and they had a little mini debate about the Constitution. And I guess Patrick Henry's, he wanted the Bill of Rights in the beginning. He wanted it. He was afraid. He couldn't trust that they would actually include those later. And Monroe wanted to just get this deal done. And Monroe prevailed, and Patrick Henry did get his Bill of Rights, so it all worked out in the end.
You mentioned the difference between working on Capitol Hill and being a member of the House of Delegates. Tell us a little bit about your experience on Capitol Hill. Who did you work for?
Well, I've had a number of experiences. In fact, I started as a page many, many years ago for Tip O'Neill, and he was a great guy. And those were the days before, cell phones, and even before pagers or anything like that. And the pages really were the cell phone of the day. We were he would just have you run off to see congressman whoever, and get back, and we were running around, and he had like 8 or 9 pages just following in his wake as he would walk down through the Rayburn Building or the Longworth Building or in the Capitol, and it was a lot of fun. And that's when I really got the bug for politics, I think, and then I went to University of Virginia, and I was a history and English major, but I really enjoyed politics from that point on, and came back to the Hill and went to law school at Catholic University. And while I was in law school, I interned also in the House Judiciary Committee. And I was in the subcommittee on, I think it was criminal justice subcommittee. And that was a great experience too, and which was very helpful for the committee I'm on now, with the courts committee. And then after I graduated from law school, I was very active in politics back in Mount Vernon, and worked on Mayor Moran, who was running for Congress against Stan Paris, who was the incumbent, and worked on his campaign, and he won, and he hired me to be one of his legislative aides, and I was there for this first 8 or 9 years, I guess, and it was really exciting. And for a few years, I think we were in the majority, but mostly in the minority, which again has prepared me well for down here in Richmond. So it's there's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot that is so different, like the voting, for example. But you have to be careful. You can't rely on that experience, because it's not the same. You know, and this body predates the Congress by 140 years or so. So this is a much more historic body of, you know, there's, you go in the U.S. Capitol and you think, wow, this is incredible. This is such an ancient, you know, assembly and a beacon of democracy. And then you come here and we trumped that by over 100 years. So.
And I guess the other distinguishing factor is that you are a citizen legislator. The sessions are limited by law. This is the long session, 60 days, so you get a lot of work done during that 60-day period, however.
Well, the U.S. Congress used to be that way, too. I heard a story, I don't know if this is true, but that air conditioning was invented in Washington, D.C., and at the first building they used, it was the Capitol. And once they had air conditioning, they were able to have a full year session. Maybe that's true, maybe that's not true, I don't know. I'll have to look it up one day. But it was, once upon a time, the same kind of thing. That was the intent, and I'm sure it was modeled on Virginia.
Now, you mentioned your law degree, but you are the chief executive officer of a nonprofit, are you not?
Well, I am the executive director of Christian Relief Services.
Okay.
And and I'm also the general counsel, and we do a lot of affordable housing around the country, but primarily we're a development agency, and we have a lot of programs in Africa with raising orphans and farming, organic farming. Usually some of the programs we have, like one in Kenya where there's the orphanage and there's a school and then there's a farm, and they all work in conjunction. And it's really exciting because the kids learn how to farm. They also grow their own food, and they grow enough food to help pay for some of the expenses at the school as well as the orphanage. So those are the kinds of things we do at Christian Relief Services. It's exciting, it's nice, and for 2 months I have a great staff, and they're handling it, I'm sure, very well.
Now, to what extent will that inform your work here or your philosophy?
Well, it already has. I've worked with a lot of Native Americans over my career, working with Christian Relief Services. We've done some programs out on Indian reservations, like in Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota, which is the poorest place in the whole Western Hemisphere. Well, in the United States for sure. I think in the Western Hemisphere, it's the second after Haiti for men's life expectancy.
Really?
Yes. We're talking from a male Ogallala, it's something like 46, 47 years of age.
Wow.
So you have a really low life expectancy, very tough life out there. A lot of people don't have running water. They don't have, some of them have to travel hours to get like things that we take for granted, going to this grocery store. A lot of the biggest problem is health care and things like kidney dialysis. And so you can imagine, if you have to be on kidney dialysis 3 times a week, and you have to travel 3-4 hours to get there, and then you're on it for 3 or 4 hours, coming back, it's very difficult. I mean, you're falling asleep at the wheel. It's dangerous. And so we put up some kidney dialysis. We've got some clinics that we've put up on Pine Ridge and on Cheyenne River Indian Reservation. So I have a lot of experience working there. And one of the things I noticed in Virginia is, and in South Dakota, for example, they have a day called Native American Day, and it's an actual state holiday. And in fact, it was Columbus Day. They no longer have Columbus Day. And now I wasn't, I knew that coming down here in the minority and being a freshman that I wasn't going to be able to replace Columbus Day with Native American Day. So I thought I would just try something a little bit, possible, and do Native American Day as well as Columbus Day on the same day. And in fact, it's also, I believe it's Yorktown Victory Day or something like that as well going on that day. But so went to subcommittee in the education. Went to I guess this is the thing I'm starting. The
Absolutely.
other thing on the Hill is that all the committees have different names, and some have the same name, like appropriations. It's the same. We have appropriations, but many of them are different. So I'm not sure which. I think it was general laws, which doesn't translate. There is no. I guess it's Judiciary Committee on the Hill. But anyway, it went wherever it went. In the subcommittee, they passed it, and so you got to get through the subcommittee. That's where all the action really happens, because if it's recommended unanimously in a subcommittee, in the full committee, it's probably pretty pro forma. It'll go on to the floor, and then there's the 3 readings on the floor. So this bill ended up changing around and becoming because the subcommittee asked me to go back and talk to the community, the Native American community in Virginia, in which we have a very robust American Indian community here in Virginia. We have 11 tribes, like the Chickahominy, the Pamunkey, there's a number of them, and they've got an incredible history here, and have been recognized by Virginia. Some of them in like 1643, so it goes way back, and so I went back to the tribes and talked to a bunch of the tribal leaders, and they didn't want to share, and rightfully so. Why should they share their day with Columbus, who came to the New World and really eradicated and was the beginning of wiping out and annihilating many of the Indian population. And so they had a great idea, and I think it's brilliant, and that is the day before Thanksgiving, which is the same day that I believe it's the Monacan tribe brings the tribute to the governor the day before Thanksgiving. And I know that the Pamunkeys also do a tribute. And so they have, and that tribute is a part of the treaty from way back when, that they would bring this tribute. And they bring usually a deer or turkey or something.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So every Wednesday, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So we wanted to make that the Native American holiday, but they also wanted a different name. They liked Indigenous Peoples Day. So today it's going to the floor on first reading. So we've got the bill through, and it's going to be, and the bill is for an Indigenous Peoples Day on the day before Thanksgiving, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving every year. However, it's not a holiday, because if it was a holiday, then there would be a fiscal impact.
I see.
And we'd have to go to the Appropriations Committee and they would tell us how much it would cost. The state, I'm sure it's in the millions of dollars.
And you'd have to you'd have to proceed with a budget amendment there.
Then I'd have to have a budget amendment. And from my experience already, I've had 2 budget amendments killed, and they're not easy, because you've really got to be able to identify funds. And so, we'll start small. That's what I'm learning. You gotta take baby steps here, and hopefully this will get through the first reading today and the second reading tomorrow, and the third reading the day after that, and we'll have, by the end of the week, we'll have a bill that's come through the House, and then it's got to go to the Senate, and then of course to the governor for a Indigenous Peoples Day on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving.
So there's not a Senate analog to this bill?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
And that's another part that I'm starting to learn. I'm not sure when it's strategic to have something over there, or when it's not. And I do know a lot of the senators, so I could have perhaps followed that, pursued that. There are some bills that I've been working on that have Senate, similar bills in the Senate, and where we've co-patroned each other's bills. Another difference from the U.S. Congress, you can't co-patron a senator's bill if you're a House member, vice versa. Not that I'm aware.
So, assuming this bill passes the House of Delegates, you will be required to present it in the Senate yourself, I take it.
Oh, really? Now that's new too. I know I'm going to have to present it on the House floor. Oh, well, that's interesting. Well,
you may have to do it in committee, I believe.
Maybe it's a committee. Yeah, probably in the. They'll have a, what do they call that? And when they have the committees meet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Now you also have another bill dealing with Native Americans, and that has to do with in-state tuition.
Right. So that went to the Education Subcommittee on the Higher Education Subcommittee, and because the bill is to provide any Native American who's a member of a Virginia tribe. So if you're a tribal member of one of the 11 tribes, and you happen to live out of state, you could still come back to Virginia and be considered for in-state tuition. It's already true for National Guardsmen and people like that who are from other states who are stationed here. So there's some exceptions already to that in-state tuition rule. So I thought this would be another good one for a number of reasons. First of all, it's not going to have a big impact because there's very few young people at that age in the kind of college application age and that are out of state. But if you think about it traditionally, the state was not even in existence when our tribes, were here, and their lands went beyond. They went into Tennessee and into West Virginia and North Carolina, places like that. So you could still be a Virginia tribal member living across the border.
I see.
And so I thought that would be it's really a matter of fairness and equity to allow them to have the same, be in the same kind of category as somebody who lives in Virginia. And the second reason is, frankly, I went to UVA, great school, I really loved it, enjoyed it, but you can never have too much diversity, especially Native American diversity. Very few Native Americans in our universities in Virginia. Some states, Oklahoma, for example, has a law that allows any Native American, so it could be a Virginia tribal member, would get in-state tuition at any of the Oklahoma public schools, universities. So that's, they're really trying to be supportive. And, maybe that's something I'll do in the long term. We'll see if that works. But first, again, baby steps. And unfortunately, the bill sailed through the subcommittee. And of course, as you mentioned, we had to have an appropriation. And that, it's a very hard number to get your head around. How many kids are we talking about? And I really still don't understand exactly how you figure out the amount of money. But they come up with some way of some equation, that comes, so that wasn't going to happen because of that alone. And so it did get through without all the, both parties voted for it. Then it went to the full committee, and it was struck down on party lines. And I think, they're not going to let a freshman have too many bills get through. That's understandable. And, everybody, let me just say something,
Sure.
Woody, I've really enjoyed the camaraderie here. Both Democrats and Republicans, we really work together. I mean, yes, we're going to campaign against each other every 2 years, but while we're down here, we try to, I've found that they reach out. And for the most part, we agree on, we all agree on a lot of this stuff. It's just making, it's making the code better. It's making government work for the people. And you don't have that, there's only the few kind of bigger issues like, guns and abortion where we kind of differ on there's a few big ones. Those are two of them.
So 99% of the time.
I wouldn't say 99%, maybe 85.
Back to your Native American initiatives, who determines tribal recognition?
The tribe does. I mean, the tribe knows who their members are. They have the rolls there, and they keep records, and they trace your lineage and everything. So, yeah.
Now, you mentioned that you serve on the Courts of Justice
That was
Committee.
a question, by the way, that came up in the committee.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so good question. You could be a legislator.
You serve on courts of justice, counties, cities, and towns. Tell us a little bit more about courts of justice, what kinds of issues come before it, and what kinds of issues come before counties, cities, and towns.
Well, let me start with the county, cities, and towns, because it's this kind of smaller, or it's not as big of a responsibility. The courts committee meets Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, half an hour after session ends. So we don't know what time that is. Some session sometimes is, it's been half an hour. Sometimes it's 2, 3, 4 hours. So right after that, we have our courts committee. And then right after the courts committee is the subcommittee that I'm on, which is the civil laws subcommittee. And so Monday, Wednesday, and Friday afternoons, from 12 when session starts to the end of the, to the evening, sometimes late into the evening, I'm busy. And so that's a big committee. It's almost like 2 committee assignments. The county, cities, and towns meets on Friday mornings at, I think it's like 7. Sometimes it's been 8, 7:37, depends. I think the chairman likes to get it done by 9. So if it's a big docket, he'll move it earlier. And that committee is, and then there's a subcommittee that I'm on. It's called Subcommittee 1. And that committee meets Wednesday mornings at 7:30. So Wednesdays and Fridays are long days because they start early in the morning. you know, at 7, 7:30, sometimes 8 o'clock, and then you've got the whole session, and then then I go to courts, and then the civil subcommittee, and it's a long day. But the one thing I learned in the city county towns that's kind of interesting is, did you know that do you know what the largest town in Virginia is right now that's not a city?
No, please tell me.
It's Leesburg.
Leesburg.
Leesburg,
Wow.
out in Loudoun County. So Leesburg has about 40,000 people, and Leesburg, apparently, according to the sponsor of the bill, or the patron of the bill, that's another difference. In the Hill, they call it sponsors. The patron of the bill wants to become a city, or is thinking about becoming a city. I guess that's the thing. So they're thinking about becoming a city, and so those aren't Democrat-Republican issues. They're
Right.
kind of good governance, what's going on issues. And that's what you do. You're on there like a jury almost that gets to ask questions, and so it was interesting because the city has not had a study, and they want to do a study on whether or not they should become a city. So they're thinking about becoming a city, but they don't want to spend any money or time on a study until they know that they could become a city.
I see.
So they wanted to have the ability to become a city, but maybe they won't. Well, that didn't go. That didn't fly, right? So they're like, if you want to become a city, you got to know that you want to become a city. Do your study. I know it's going to cost money. So both Democrats and Republicans kind of shot that down together, and that's kind of situation we get in city county.
Yeah, that's interesting because the local jurisdictions are creatures of the state. They're created by the state. They can't impose a tax, for example, without the permission of the state. So that makes your role on that committee very important.
Yeah, that's the old Dillon rule.
Yes.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, there's things like there's some towns that don't want to become a town or would like to get rid of being a town. Apparently, there was three. There's been in the last I don't know how many years, 3 cities that are no longer cities anymore. They're now towns. I think South Boston's one of them. So the growth of cities in Virginia has been going down. The second biggest is down in Virginia Tech, but it's only got 20,000 down there. But Blacksburg, the civil, to answer your question about the civil, so the courts of justice is an amazing place, and it's a good thing I'm a lawyer, but I've got a bone up on my civil law. It reminds me of being in law school, and the law professor is our chairman. He is very knowledgeable and really.
Dave Albo?
No, well, Albo's the chairman of the whole entire.
Yes.
But the subcommittee chairman is Habib, and he is one of the smartest men I've met down here. This is a very smart group of people, women, men, everybody, both sides. I'm very impressed. Sometimes I'm wondering if maybe I'm out of my league down here. These guys know what they're doing. But if you needed a lawyer for any kind of civil infraction, you should hire him because he knows what he's doing. But it moves quick. Again, it's kind of like on the floor with the speaker. You have to vote in 5 seconds. We move pretty quick, and you gotta get those questions in. But he's very fair, and I've noticed that about all the committees I'm on, the chairman allows every witness to speak, and sometimes we have many witnesses, and sometimes they're repeating the same thing that was said already, but they all get a chance to speak, and we never cut anybody off. And so it's very respectful, and we give, it's really a democratic process. Everybody comes from all over Virginia, I should say, all over Virginia, and they get to testify. So it's pretty exciting. It's pretty fun.
Well, you had an interesting meeting last week. It had to do with selection of Supreme Court judges, and that whole selection process is a little bit different than what other states pursue.
Or as well, again, it's different than the Supreme Court, is how it's selected.
Yes.
We don't select, we elect. The General Assembly elects the Supreme Court justices, and all the justices. And so we had both Justice Rouse and Judge Alston came to our full courts committee, and both we certified them to the General Assembly. So the certification process, it has to take place first by the courts committee, and then it goes to the General Assembly. I don't know when that's going to come. I think we have to wait till the Senate does the same thing.
Let's turn our attention once more to some specific pieces of legislation, especially something that affects your district, payday loans and title loans. Talk to us about those.
Well, it's a real problem in Mount Vernon. We have, I think, 12 or 13 title lenders along what we call the Richmond Highway corridor. So Mount Vernon is my district, the 44th district. The southern part of it goes right up to Mount Vernon where the plantation is there. And that's Chairman Albo, David Albo, has the district to the south of me. To the north is really Old Town. And that's Mark Levine, the new also freshman. And then to the west is Mark Sickles, and he's on the Appropriations Committee, a Democrat who's been here 10 years, I think. And so that whole area in the middle there, from a little bit over west of Richmond Highway into the Lee Magisterial District of Fairfax County, all the way over to the river, to the Potomac River, is Mount Vernon, and that's the Mount Vernon District and the Magisterial District. In the south, kind of, we call it Southeast County of Fairfax County. And it's a great place. It's where I grew up. My daughter goes to the same high school I went to. She's in 9th grade. It's fantastic location, great people. And it's an honor for me to be able to represent them. I really do enjoy it. And this part is fun down here, but I love being back home and talking to people about things that I can do to help their lives. And that's what it's all about. It's kind of like being a congressman in a mini scale, you know. I do get a lot of... Funny thing is, I get a lot of inquiries for things that should be a congressman's. Like there was people during this big snowstorm we just had.
Yes.
They didn't get their mail. Well, that's a federal issue. So I like to kick that to our Congressman Don Beyer. But I'm sorry, and I've gotten.
Oh, that's all right. We were talking about the payday and title.
Oh, yeah, the payday
loan.
and title. So we have 12, 13 of these payday and title lenders, and they're really an eyesore on the highway. They're in the little, they're in these little houses, strip malls, and they're not something that anybody really wanted. There was no market for them. It's not like they replaced, some kind of a racket of, criminal enterprise that's trying to give out loan sharking. I talked to our police captain. That was never a problem. Loan sharking was not a problem. So it's a kind of a false economy. So they do a lot of marketing. They've got on cable especially. So it's like, hey, easy money, come in, get your, all you gotta do is sign over your title to your car. We'll give you $1,000. What you don't realize is that if you don't pay that off in a couple months, you're gonna owe that $1,000 plus another $1,000, and you're gonna be, and before you know it, you're never gonna be able to get your car back. You won't be able to afford it. And here's the concern, which is unique to Mount Vernon and Lee and maybe Alexandria. In July or August sometime in Maryland, we're going to have a casino opening up across the river. So that's a concern of ours.
Great. Well, thank you for being here, Delegate Paul Krizek.
Thank you very much, Woody. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications. Until next time, I am Woody Evans.